Palguine Creek. The Palguine is like a class 4, 3+4 steep creek in southern Chile. It's something I've wanted to run since I got here. This is actually my second attempt to try to run it. Let me tell you about this creek now. To get into it, there's like a land bridge over the river, and you walk onto the land bridge, and you get in your boat on top of it, and you drop 12 feet into the gorge that the creek runs through. And once you're in, because just below that pool is the entrance rapid to the first waterfall. And this rapid has like a rocky section that you got to navigate your way through. Then at the bottom of the rocky section, there's a narrow chute that drops like 45 degrees for 10 feet into a small pool. And at the end of the pool, there's like a 4-meter waterfall. The Palguine has 2 other waterfalls. The last one is 8 meters high. It's like 25 feet. So you can imagine how much fun I had on it today. It's one of the most fun days I've ever had in my life. But it was a day of prayer. Now it wasn't, some of you might be thinking, duh, it was a day of prayer. You know, that kind of prayer like, God, keep me safe on this river, and I promise I'm not going to skip church again for the rest of the year. It wasn't that kind of prayer. It's a much different sort of prayer. I was reading a book a year ago called, I think this is from Free to Pray, Free to Love. And what it said is that when we pray and we need to ask God for something, to ask God once and then just let it go. And to trust God with it, to put it into his hands, that he knows our desire and that we trust whatever result that he gives us, that it will be his will. And so when I was praying for a good trip, I consciously decided, I'm going to try this. I'm going to pray once and I'm going to let it go. And it wasn't easy. We walked the whole river first to scout it. And so I'm standing there looking at the first rapid, this complicated maze of rocks and chutes and this little pool above the waterfall, scared to death. And the temptation was to be, oh God, please, you got to keep me safe. Oh God, please, you got to keep me safe. Oh God, please, you got to keep me safe. And just start rambling and rambling and rambling. But I calmed myself. I actually managed to do this and say, God, it's in your hands. I'd already prayed for it, and I already knew that the Father was going to do his will, and I trusted that. And it wasn't easy. And it wasn't just a one-way prayer either. It was actually a two-way prayer. Because prayer is not just talking to God, it's also listening to God. And the kind of two-way prayer this was, I think, is a very similar kind of two-way prayer to when Peter was on the boat asking Jesus to call him out of it. Because he's standing there, right? We'll go back to this again. When Peter walked on water, Jesus passed by, and Peter called out to him to ask him, call me onto the water. Call me to come to you. And he didn't just say that and then dive in and hope for the best. He said that, and then he waited for Christ to answer him. And that's what I was doing with this two-way prayer. Part of my prayer was to ask God for a calling to do this. And you might think that's kind of strange. Why would God call me to knock myself off of a 25-foot waterfall in Chile? Doesn't really seem like a very holy thing to do. But I'm a Christian, and everything I do is for God. And so I'm going to ask him for that calling. And not just that, in the listening, kayakers trust their instinct. When you learn to kayak over years, you learn to trust how you feel about a river. You can look at it and just right away know, yeah, I'm going to run that, or no, I'm not. And so when I was listening, what I was listening for was messages from God, and not like, like a radio in my ear, God saying, Ryan, don't run that waterfall. But rather like, trusting my gut feeling, trusting the night's sleep I had before, trusting physically how I was doing that day, trusting how mentally focused I could stay. Because I had asked God to give me those clues, to give me those signs, and to be present in that discernment. And he was. And so prayer is a lot about trust. We go back to Peter walking on the water. When Peter got that call from Jesus, he acted on it. But when he asked, he trusted what Christ had to say. If Jesus had said, Peter, today is not the day for you to walk on water, he probably would have stayed in the boat. And so when we pray, we need to have that trust, both in the way we speak, asking God for something and then trusting him for it, and in the way we listen, trusting in the confirmation that we get from God in the actions that we do every day. So there's the challenge from this talk. Next time you need something, next time you ask God for something, and it doesn't have to be dramatic like running down some crazy creek in the middle of Chile. It can be some everyday thing, maybe confidence in a test at school, or maybe courage to, resolve a conflict in a friendship. But next time, any little thing like that, I challenge you to ask God once, to let it go, and then to trust and listen for the answer.